The Grand River forks at a place where the high plains of what is now northwestern South Dakota meet broken country. The terrain is not mountainous but neither is it flat. Low ridges rise and fall. Creeks cut through layers of sediment. Cottonwoods grow along the watercourses. In summer the grass is short and dry. The sky is wide. The isolation is total. In August of 1823 this was unmapped country for Americans. It belonged to the Arikara and the Sioux. Grizzly bears moved through it. Bison herds crossed it. There were no settlements, no roads, no names on any map drawn east of the Mississippi. A group of 30 men were traveling through this country on foot. They were fur trappers working for the Rocky Mountain Fur Company, an enterprise organized by William Henry Ashley and Andrew Henry. The men were moving overland from the Missouri River toward the Yellowstone River country, where beaver were said to be plentiful. They had been walking for days. They carried rifles, knives, traps, and minimal supplies. The journey was a traverse across hostile ground to reach a destination where they might make money. Among them was a man named Hugh Glass. He was approximately 40 years old, though the exact year of his birth is uncertain. Some accounts place it around 1783. He is believed to have been born in Pennsylvania, the son of Irish immigrants. The details of his early life are not well documented. He is said to have been captured by pirates in the Gulf of Mexico around 1816, forced into service, then escaped by swimming to shore near Galveston. He may have lived among the Pawnee for several years. In 1821 he appeared in St. Louis. In 1822 he joined Ashley's fur trading expedition. By 1823 he was an experienced frontiersman, literate, capable with weapons, familiar with the wilderness. He was not young. He was not reckless. He was a working trapper. In June of 1823, Glass and the Ashley party had been attacked by Arikara warriors near the Missouri River. Glass was shot in the leg during that engagement. The expedition retreated, regrouped, and continued. Andrew Henry, Ashley's partner, now led the overland party. The men were moving carefully through Arikara territory, aware that another attack was possible. On a day in mid-August, the exact date uncertain, Glass was walking ahead of the main group. He was scouting for game. The party needed meat. The assignment was routine. He moved through a ravine or along a creek bed near the forks of the Grand River. The area was thick with brush and willow. He came upon a grizzly bear with 2 cubs. The details of what happened next come from second-hand accounts. Glass likely startled the bear. She charged. He may have fired his rifle but there was no time to reload. The bear reached him, seized him, and began mauling him. Glass fought with his knife. He fought with his hands. The bear tore into him. The attack was brutal and fast. Glass screamed. Men from the party heard the screams and ran toward them. They shot the bear. The bear fell dead. Glass lay on the ground, conscious but mutilated. An account attributed to Hiram Allen, a trapper present at the scene, describes the injuries. The bear had torn flesh from the lower part of Glass's body and from his limbs. His neck was shockingly torn. There was an aperture in his throat. When he breathed, air moved through the wound in his neck. Blood flowed freely. His scalp was ripped. His back was laid open. Deep lacerations exposed his ribs. One leg was broken. His hands and arms, remarkably, were not disabled. The men believed Glass would die within hours. They wrapped his wounds as well as they could. They placed a bear hide over him. They fashioned a litter from tree boughs and carried him. For 2 days they carried him. The pace of the entire party slowed. Andrew Henry understood that continuing this way placed all 30 men at risk. They were in Arikara country. They were vulnerable. Carrying a dying man farther was not practical. Henry asked for volunteers to stay with Glass until he died, then bury him, and catch up with the main party. He offered payment. 2 men stepped forward. One was John S. Fitzgerald, an older trapper. The other was a young man later identified as someone called Bridges. Whether this was Jim Bridger, who would later become a famous mountain man, remains debated. Bridger was 19 years old in 1823. Some sources say he was the second volunteer. Other sources say the identification is uncertain. The main party moved on. Fitzgerald and the young man remained with Glass. They dug a shallow grave. They waited. Glass did not die. He remained unconscious but breathing. Days passed. The 2 men grew anxious. They were alone in hostile territory with a man who would not die. On the fifth day, or perhaps earlier, Fitzgerald and his companion decided to leave. They took Glass's rifle, his knife, and his other equipment. They filled in the grave partially or left it open. They rejoined the main party and reported that Glass had died. Glass regained consciousness. He found himself alone. He had no weapons. He had no supplies. His leg was broken. His throat was punctured. His back was open to the bone. The nearest American settlement was Fort Kiowa on the Missouri River, more than 200 miles to the southeast. The nearest help might be the main party, but they were days ahead and moving away. He was alone in country controlled by the Iroquois. He did not die. He lay in the shallow grave or beside it for an unknown period. Hours or a day. He assessed his situation. He had been left with the bare hide. He wrapped himself in it. He set the bone in his broken leg himself. The method is not recorded. He likely used wood and rawhide to splint it. The pain is not described in any account. He began to address the wounds. Gangrene was a certainty if the dead flesh remained. He allowed maggots to consume the necrotic tissue. This is a historical method of wound cleaning, documented in other frontier accounts. It is not clear whether the maggots appeared naturally or whether Glass placed them deliberately. He could not walk. He began to crawl. He oriented himself using Thunder Butte, a prominent landmark to the south. He crawled overland. The terrain was broken. He moved slowly. He rested frequently. He found water in creeks. He foraged for wild berries and roots. The specific types are not recorded, but chokecherries, wild plums, and prairie turnips would have been available in late summer. He moved a few miles each day. Sometimes less. The journey took 6 weeks. The historical sources agree on this duration. 200 miles in 6 weeks is an average of fewer than 5 miles per day. On some days he may have moved farther. On others he may not have moved at all. His leg was broken. His wounds were severe. He was in his 40s. The physical decline over those weeks can be imagined but is not documented in detail. At some point he reached the Cheyenne River. He constructed a crude raft from driftwood or logs. He floated downstream. The Cheyenne River flows east and joins the Missouri River near present-day Pierre, South Dakota. Fort Kiowa was located on the Missouri River south of that confluence. Floating downstream would have been faster than crawling, but it required him to remain on the raft for long periods without shelter, exposed to sun and weather, unable to forage efficiently. Glass arrived at Fort Kiowa on or around October 11, 1823. The exact date is uncertain, but multiple accounts place his arrival in mid-October. He had traveled approximately 200 miles, possibly more, over approximately 6 weeks. He had survived on berries, roots, and possibly scavenged meat from animal carcasses. He was emaciated. His wounds had partially healed. He was alive. At Fort Kiowa he recuperated. The process is not well documented. He was given food, shelter, and medical attention such as it existed on the frontier. He likely rested for several weeks. During this time he learned that Fitzgerald and the younger man had rejoined the party. He learned they had taken his rifle. He learned they had abandoned him. The accounts agree that Glass resolved to find them. By late autumn or early winter of 1823, Glass had recovered sufficiently to travel. He set out to find the two men. His goal was retribution, though the specific nature of that retribution is not stated in the historical record. He traveled north and west, following the route the party would have taken. He traveled to Fort Henry, a trading post Andrew Henry had established at the mouth of the Yellowstone River. When he arrived he found the fort deserted. A note indicated the party had relocated to a new camp at the mouth of the Bighorn River. Glass continued. He traveled through the winter. The distances involved were several hundred miles. He traveled alone or with occasional companions. At some point he was again attacked by Iroquois warriors, though the details of this encounter are vague. He reached the new camp at the mouth of the Bighorn River in early 1824. There he found the younger man, identified as Bridges. The accounts say Glass forgave him because of his youth. Jim Bridger, if it was indeed him, was 19 at the time of the abandonment and 20 by the time Glass found him. Glass did not harm him. He re-enlisted with Ashley's company and continued trapping. Glass eventually learned that Fitzgerald had left the trapping enterprise and joined the United States Army. Fitzgerald was stationed at Fort Atkinson in present-day Nebraska. Glass traveled there. The timeline is uncertain, but it was likely in early to mid-1824. At Fort Atkinson, Glass confronted Fitzgerald. Fitzgerald was now a soldier. Killing a soldier was a federal crime punishable by execution. The fort's commanding officer intervened. Fitzgerald was ordered to return Glass's rifle. The rifle was returned. According to one account, Glass also received $300 as compensation, though this detail appears in only one source and may be embellished. Glass reportedly told Fitzgerald never to leave the army or he would kill him. Then Glass left. That could have been the end of the story. It was not. In February 1824, Glass and 4 other men were dispatched with mail from the Bighorn River camp to Fort Atkinson. They traveled east, crossing the Powder River and then moving toward the Platte River. They constructed bull boats, circular vessels made from bison hide stretched over wooden frames, and floated down the Platte River. Near the Black Hills they encountered a settlement of 38 lodges of Arikara. The leader, whom Glass knew, declared the tribe friendly and invited the trappers ashore. The men accepted. While sitting in the leader's lodge, Glass noticed Arikara warriors taking their equipment. He realized it was a trap. The 5 men fled. 2 were killed by pursuing warriors. Glass hid behind rocks until the Arikara gave up the search. He was separated from the other 2 survivors. He was once again alone in hostile country with only a knife and flint. He traveled overland to Fort Kiowa, surviving off the land. He arrived safely. Glass returned to the fur trade. He continued trapping and hunting for several more years. By the late 1820s he was employed as a hunter for the United States Army garrison at Fort Union, a trading post near present-day Williston, North Dakota, at the confluence of the Yellowstone and Missouri rivers. He was in his late 40s or early 50s. He was still working the frontier. In the winter of early 1833, Glass and 2 companions, Edward Rose and Highland Menard, were traveling on the frozen Yellowstone River. They were attacked by Arikara warriors. All 3 men were killed. The exact location is uncertain, but it was near Fort Union. Glass was approximately 50 years old. His death was not remarkable in the context of frontier violence. Many trappers died in similar circumstances. His body was not recovered for burial in any formal sense. The story of the bear attack and the 200-mile crawl survived him. The first published account appeared in March 1825 in a Philadelphia literary journal called the Port Folio, in a piece titled The Missouri Trapper. The author was later revealed to be James Hall, a writer with an interest in frontier stories. Hall's account was based on second-hand information. It contained elements of fact and elements of embellishment. No written account by Glass himself exists. He was literate, as evidenced by a letter he wrote in June 1823 to the parents of a man killed in the Arikara attack, but he left no record of the bear attack or his survival. The story was retold in newspapers and magazines throughout the 19th century. Each retelling added details or altered existing ones. By the time the story entered popular legend, it was difficult to separate fact from fiction. The core elements remained consistent across sources. Glass was mauled by a bear in August 1823. He was left for dead by 2 companions. He survived and traveled approximately 200 miles over 6 weeks to Fort Kiowa. He recovered and confronted the men who abandoned him. He did not kill them. He continued trapping until he was killed by Arikara warriors in 1833. The story has been used as a symbol of perseverance, of revenge, of forgiveness, of the brutality of frontier life. It has been adapted into films, books, poems, and television episodes. A monument stands near the site of the attack on the southern shore of Shade Hill Reservoir in Perkins County, South Dakota. The monument is a welded sculpture of Glass being attacked by the bear. It was dedicated in 2015. The site is remote and receives few visitors. The accuracy of the story will never be fully established. No photographs exist. No medical records exist. No detailed journal entries by Glass exist. The historical sources are second-hand accounts written years or decades after the events. The earliest account was published less than 2 years after the attack but was written by someone who was not present. Later accounts by trappers who knew Glass, such as George Yount, were not published until the early 20th century. The story has been shaped by the limitations of historical documentation and by the human tendency to transform suffering into narrative. What remains certain is that a man named Hugh Glass was part of Andrew Henry's overland expedition in 1823, was attacked by a grizzly bear near the Grand River in what is now South Dakota, survived severe injuries, and traveled a great distance alone to reach safety. The specifics of that survival, the psychological dimensions of his ordeal, the precise nature of his injuries, and the exact sequence of events during his journey remain partially obscured. The story endures not because every detail is verified but because the verified details are sufficient to establish the event as real. Glass represents a type of frontier endurance that is difficult to categorize. He was not a soldier fighting for a cause. He was not an explorer charting new territory. He was a trapper trying to make money in a dangerous profession. When he was abandoned, he did not have a mission to complete or a family to return to. He simply refused to die. The refusal is the story. The crawl across 200 miles of hostile country with a broken leg and exposed ribs and a punctured throat is not heroic in a conventional sense. It is biological. It is the body continuing because the alternative is death. The landscape where this occurred is still remote. The Grand River still forks near Shade Hill Reservoir. The high plains still stretch in all directions. Grizzly bears no longer inhabit the area. The Arikara were forcibly relocated in the 19th century. Fort Kiowa no longer exists. The Missouri River has been dammed and its course altered. The wilderness Glass crossed is now ranchland and public land. The distance he crawled can be driven in a few hours. The story is taught in schools in South Dakota. It is part of the state's historical identity. It is also part of a larger American mythology about the frontier, about survival, about self-reliance. The mythology often emphasizes the individual struggle and the triumph. The historical reality is more ambiguous. Glass survived, but he survived alone in a country that was not empty but was inhabited by people who had been displaced by the fur trade and by American expansion. His survival was exceptional, but his presence in that country was part of a larger pattern of extraction and violence. The story has no clean ending. Glass did not retire from trapping after his survival. He did not write a memoir. He did not become famous in his lifetime. He returned to the same dangerous work that nearly killed him. He was killed 10 years later in circumstances similar to those he had survived before. The meaning of his survival is open to interpretation. It can be read as perseverance or as futility. It can be read as revenge deferred or as forgiveness chosen. It can be read as a testament to human endurance or as a story about the indifference of the natural world to human suffering. The historical record closes with his death in 1833. The legend that followed is separate from the man. The monument near Shade Hill Reservoir is a sculpture, not a grave. Glass has no marked grave. His body was left where he was killed, somewhere along the Yellowstone River. The ground has long since reclaimed it. What remains is the documented fact of the journey. 200 miles. 6 weeks. Alone. Injured. No supplies. No weapons. The distance and the duration are the only measurements that matter. The rest is interpretation.